I see people popping in, and we will slowly kick it off. Hi Bjarne, hi Anne, hi Charlotte, hi Lou, hi Mike and Natasha, Thomas, and of course hi Varan. That is really nice. Welcome to this Wednesday afternoon webinar. This is our second in a small series of small bleeps that we send out into to the audience and try to get a good conversation going. And I'm really looking forward to how we can exactly to have a conversation over the next 45 hours or something like that. Just a small hygiene. Please mute unless you have a very good noise cancelling microphone going on. You can turn your camera on if you want to. It's really nice for Varan and me to see that there are actually faces there, so we can talk to faces and not just the black tiles. Absolutely feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat, and so will Mike Stoll, who is helping us with it. My name is Erik Korsvik Østergaard, and I am the initiator of Good Morning April. Good Morning April is a group of people who try to look into the future to see what is actually going on and pulling those signals back now, and to see how can we handle that kind of change that we're looking into. So we are really curious about change, about the new ways of working, about the futures literacy, and having Varan here today is really cool because it fits with what is going on. Let me start actually by showing you this magazine cover. It's from Wired. It's new. It's from May. I think I got it a week ago or 5 days ago. The front side is not what I'm going to show. It's the back. Wired goes out to 4 million subscribers, and the back has this ad on it: social responsible investment. And it's really interesting to see that these kinds of ads, these kinds of interests in exactly social responsible or social engaging investments is a signal for what we're going to talk about today. So it is right now, this is happening in front of us. I like to look into the futures thinking to understand that. In Danish, it's called fremtidsforskning or fremtidstænkning. In Danish, it's in singularis, but in English, there's this plural S in futures, and this is exactly what we're going for. This is exactly to understand that there are multiple futures that we need to embrace and play around with and fiddle around with, and that's why we're here. And yeah. Before we dive into it all, I just need to make sure to state that we are recording this, so we can send it out later, or we can request it and have it bespoke afterwards. So just make sure so that you all know that we are just putting this in some MP4 file in some cloud somewhere in Ireland where it's going to land. So we all know that. What we're going to talk about today is, the activism of purpose. We have been talking about purpose for some years, maybe 2 decades. And a guy like Simon Sinek, for example, he really boosted that. We'll start with why. And we also on Danish ground have a guy called Morten Albæk, who has really advocated for finding meaningfulness. And we also have McKinsey in January this year actually stating that the bold companies are looking at purpose also as one of the drivers for identity. And what's really interesting now that we're going to talk about is not purposeful action driven by the companies, but purposeful actions or meaningful actions driven by either the employees or the customers or the grassroots. So where the purpose-driven activities is actually ripped out of the hands of the big corporates and put in or stolen, you can say, into the hands of somebody who votes with their feet and hands, or maybe votes with their money, maybe votes with how they buy stocks and get to talk together on Reddit. That's what we're going to talk about today. And that's why I'm really happy to have Varan here. I don't know that much about it, but Varan does. I met Varan 3 years ago.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Varan has a background in finance, so he knows that from inside out. Varan also knows impact activism and has created, you're also an entrepreneur, CEO of Make Impact. So there are so many things that that lines up together with having Varan here. So actually, I'm gonna stop talking now and actually giving the scene to you, Varan, to please share us your view on how you see impact activism go.
Yeah, thank you, Erik, and thanks for people joining this special signal about impact and activism. So first of all, I maybe give a brief introduction to who am I. My name is Varan. I'm 34 years old. I have been working like professionally like 10 years now. I have a master's in persuasive technology and human-computer interaction and how you change people's behavior. So that's actually behavioral science. That was my background. And then I actually ended up like accidentally into banking. And within banking, I entered into investment banking. So I was like, all right, people were laughing a little bit about me because like I was doing things about sustainability and how you change people's behavior to use less water in their gardens in Australia and use less power in Denmark because it was raining so much in Denmark. So I had to find another topic and work with sustainability. So that's actually my background. And then I entered into banking, and coming from the outside and actually understanding banking from a totally different way actually taught me to look at different domains where different signals touch like different places or times within the space. And it was really like, I think 3 years ago where I saw the light, like taking, as Steve Jobs said once, like connecting the dots. You can't like think ahead and saying what and how your career will be, but you can always connect the dots backwards and saying, this is why I'm here where I am. So 3 years ago, I had my second child, and my wife and I were like, okay, let's try to invest in this virtual driving license, because when my kids are old enough, there won't be any cars, that we have to drive. It's just, we need a driving license for sitting in a vehicle that can take me from A to C. That's what I believe in. So we wanted to save up money for that. And when we talked about like saving up money, we don't believe in pension. We believe in the FIRE principle, like financially independent, retire early. So we were also like, how can we save some money for our kids in a sustainable long-term investment way? And at that point of time, we were like, okay, we need to invest in something that we actually believe exists. So if you're from the IT or you have been in that area, you all know the Kodak moment when Fuji and Kodak were talking about that, there is something called a digital camera, and Kodak didn't, like, they missed that one, right? I think we are in the period now where if you don't take this signal up about impact activism, you might not exist within the next 10 years. And that's also why I really futuristic thinking, and that's what I really like, to be always on the edge of what's actually happening out there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the 60s movements, like, I don't know how old people are on the other side, and I don't want to like put people into any boxes, and we don't talk about generations at all, because I also think generation and old is just, it's a mindset. Like, you can be 50 and still think like a Gen Z. So it's not about that, but it's like that we could see that now this movement of the 60s and the 69, like where we have all these grassroots coming up, it's actually like, like fashion goes around. This is something like it comes up again in a different, like you call, like, I don't know whether you say it in English, but new wine on old old wine on new bottles, right? Something like that. So that's sometimes how I see that, things are trending, and there's some signals before it gets into a mega trend and a trend. And I think sustainability right now is hyper trending right now, right? But 3 years ago, when we were looking into like investment and looking into this sustainable investment, like when I talked to all the old bankers, they were like, yeah, that's something Richard Branson and all these philanthropies do. Like sustainable, responsible, so socially responsible investing and philanthropy like goes hand in hand. But becoming mainstream investing, it's not going to happen. So that was a signal that I saw 3 years ago, but nobody actually like really took it up, but now everybody's talking about it, like you said with the Wired magazine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the next part of it, as you also said with Simon Sinek, is that purpose. We've talked about that. That's great. Now we have seen some things happening 2 years ago, before with the COVID-19 and all of that thing happened last year with the pandemic. We saw a trending. I don't know, Erik, whether you call it trend or signal, but we saw something that quickly went from a signal to a trend with the Friday for the Future movement. So the 60s movement like got back again with I don't know whether she was like 13 or 14 years old, like Greta, started this movement that people actually stand up like to strike, right? And striking is the first thing you do when you're upset about things, or you get into that movement and saying, hey, we need to do something. Let's in Danish called stem dagklokker, or let's like do the striking and then sit down and no eat or whatever, to show that we are not satisfied with whoever does something. So that's what we saw 2 years ago. And what then also happened at the same time, talking about purpose, talking about sustainability, is that we saw employees. So one thing is the consumer side is striking when you call like Greta for consumer or whatever. We are consumers of a system, right? So the consumer starting striking, but also the employees started to strike. The Amazon, we have heard about that these strikes comes like where employees saying, look, we don't want to be a part of this company. You need to stop this bollocks of whatever it is. You're not sustainable, or you don't treat people ethically correct or something like that. We will see a lot of this going on in the future. It's already happening right now. And then on the investment side, the best example that I've been like so much, and that's also like why Erik and I, we have had some great talks before this webinar, was that this Reddit example. So what happened was that a lot of non-investors were a little bit upset about that bigger corporations and the investment bankers from the Wall Street bankers were like shorting a lot of stocks to earn more money, and not actually, they thought, like the Reddit community thought that the investment bankers were actually, only servicing themselves from profit. And then they got together on an online platform and talked about how they could respond to this, but in a totally different way. So what they did, they actually tried to, short, like I would say, like shorting the stock, and it changed the stock price, like going totally bananas, and everybody wanted to like get into this because they had a feeling of this is going for profit setup. What I saw here is like, it's not something that I was called up. It's like, hey, you have to get in this. You can earn a lot of money here. What I was really interested in actually to find out is like what was actually happening. So first of all, there's a community online were not satisfied by something, and they like sat together and stick together and then say, great, this is what we have to do to respond to that. And that type of impact activism. So one thing is striking and not eating and standing in front of like the governmental places in the whole world, and then striking in that way. The employees striking in front of the employers' doors at the companies, and then by investments. This is 3 ways of actually taking the purpose on your own, getting together, synergies together with more people, and then actually put the voice out there. So these 3 examples is really interesting to follow and actually have a look at, whether you are a big corporate CEO or you are a company who would like to service both your employees, your customers, and also investors going on in the future, especially with the new generation, because the new generation has so much knowledge, has so information, and they just don't care. So when I say they don't care, they actually speak up, and they do it in a way that we haven't been used to, where we could we can shut it down in some way. What happened with the Reddit, for instance, was that Robinhood, one of the big investment platforms in the world, they were told by somebody, I don't know who, but somebody told to stop the trading. And what actually happened is that the users or consumers or customers of Robinhood actually moved away from Robinhood because they didn't like that, Robinhood even having the name Robinhood and actually being, that type of, organization. They actually, it seems that they were controlled by higher authority, and that actually changed the people's decision to actually go somewhere else. So the using the buying power to drive this agenda is actually pushing the CEOs of bigger corporations as the smaller ones to go in one direction. And that's where, from my side, we need to take this signal really, really seriously, like the Kodak moment, and do some testing with this newer generation or this new way of look at impact activism. So always make sure to take the temperature and saying, where are we? So sending out a survey to customers and figuring out whether you are 3 out of 5 or a big score there, it ain't work. You need to be much, much closer to your customers. You need to get them in there, get them in the boards, and actually let them speak out of what they think. And if you really want to be on the edge of understanding what's happening with this impact activism and how you can cope and actually work together with it. Because if you actually take it into as saying, this is actually where we got a lot of new insights of how we actually have to drive the business in a direction where you make sure that the consumers are happy, the investors are happy, and also your employees are happy. You can start with just talking to your employees about the strategy and actually invite them in to do this A/B testing. And then you can start talking to your investors because they're actually on your side, because they want your business to grow. And that's why they will maybe also have some ideas about where to go. And then also, of course, with the customers or users of your organization to get more closer. But you can actually start with employees in terms of that. So that's something that I actually think that we need to embrace. And this is not just investing. I'm just really, really surprised that it actually went so fast, that from Greta to Reddit, it only took 2 years to actually get there. And we actually had a pandemic in between. So that was actually my quick thoughts about impact activism and what we have to embrace this signal about. And I hope that we can take some many questions here, and then actually take it for the next level, to try to elaborate a little bit on these signals that we see out there.
Super, Varan. Could you stop sharing so we can have more tiles showing, more faces showing up?
Yeah, I'm trying to see where I did that. Yeah, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. Varan, I'm really curious. Who should be afraid first? What kind of companies should be afraid of this first?
The oldest ones.
The oldest ones. Why that?
No. Well, I think in terms of if you can divide it into corporate, scale-up, startups, or something like that, I think especially the corporates have a big power to actually change direction. But I also think that it hurts a lot economically as well. On the big corporate side, where if you are more agile, and I know that you're using the word agile in also an IT way, but if you just take the IT out and just agile in the way that you look at strategies, I think the bigger corporations need to listen to their employees, because they have so massive amounts of impactors within their own space, and you can actually utilize that. So that's what I see, because I think the younger and the smaller companies, they have easier way to actually move direction. And now we have Thomas. I can see Thomas Bisbella is also here, and Thomas also have a great insight about what's happening with the impact activism on his work with the technology, and how the younger segment actually start sharing good news, but more about bad news about where companies is doing something which is not in line with their values. Because again, back to these things, values really, really matter. And we can talk about like also the future of work and the new generation coming at work. It goes hand in hand. It's not like there's no work-life balance anymore, right? We don't use that word, especially not the younger generation does it. So they need to really feel in love with the company. And if they don't feel in love with the company in terms of what they do, then forget about it. Don't just saying, hey, yeah, one day yearly you can do whatever you want to do, work for NGO or whatever. Like I know Danske Bank created this thing 2 years ago, and it's like come on, you can do better, right? It might be that you're doing like a lot of like anti-money laundering cases, and then you give the employees 1 day off to do some NGO work. Come on, you need to be doing more in that, because nobody buys that, I would say.
So if you were to, there's a famous notion that the business of business is business. If you were to complete that sentence, the business of business is what, Varan?
The business of business is a really, really great question. And I think it has to be something, of course, with people, right? But it's also about like the societal impact. Because in my mind, of course, it's like, oh, isn't it just CSR? No, it's not actually, because you of course need to earn money, and you can actually do good and also gain profit. But in terms of the social responsibility, that actually what gets people, up there, like, and saying, look, this is not good. You're actually hurting the society in some way, and I'm not going to be a part of that, because I know people. I feel the people on the other side of the world, because we are digital natives. So now we are sitting here and not even being together, right? So I feel I have so much empathy for people on the other side of the world, because I actually get so much information about them. So I know almost their everyday life in some way, so I can actually feel that. So I know that there's somebody in Nepal that where like my company or the third party, if I work in a bigger corporation where the third party vendors is not treated in the best way, you feel that, right? We can take the Nemly case here in Denmark, right? I'm a super fan of Stefan and Nemly and all those things. And the last couple of months, there's been so much heads on Nemly about how they treat their drivers and all those things, right? And sometimes, to be honest, like I feel like the concept is so great because we save so much time. But I've also seen the eyes of the people who's delivering my food, and I've seen them, right? So I don't know them, but that's like on a physical thing, right? Like you've seen the person, right? And I've really questioned myself, like, do I really want to do that on the saving part of it? And if I was working in the company, in the headquarters, I would still like, I feel something, right? And these feelings and these values that actually you come up, we need to speak up in some way, right? I wrote to Stefan directly because I got it, like, look, you need to do something here, right? So, and of course I could just also like shout out, but I did it in a different other way, right? So I think it's really, really important that the business of business is, I don't have the right word for it, but it's something with the societal impact, and it screams for that everybody has to take action and is taking action. And the more, I think employees will actually have the most impact within the corporations to actually change this, because we actually have a voice, and that voice have to be used more and more, because consumers and investors are a little bit more externally from a company perspective in terms of the survival of it. So
some of these companies that I look at or work with, some of them are inspired by the movements like B Corp or conscious capitalism or freedom at work, or some variants hereof, which where the business of business is responsibility or impact or well-being or prosperity or something like that. How can we as an organization keep doing that in the positive sense, and then avoid that it ends up in activism, which seems like, well, we're nearly talking being a rebel, we're nearly talking pulling something apart. How can the companies stay in that proactive, progressive mindset and not like losing grip of it? What will will be your input?
I think I shared the other day the top 5 Gen Z inspiring titles coming up, and I think one of them was Chief Impact Officer, right? So we have Chief Sustainability Officer, yeah, blah blah, and we have Ethics Advocate, that's also cool, and then we have Chief TikTok Officer and all other things. But the Chief Impact Officer, like I'll really say that, you know, what we need to make sure of, and what we have to be careful, of course, like companies, they're scared of getting into a greenwashing perspective. Or getting accused for greenwashing. That's one thing that they're scared about. And what they do, they green hush, so they don't communicate anything. But sometimes it's really, really important to actually, one thing is like being transparent and saying, look, we're not there, but we're working on it and blah, blah, blah. But maybe I would say working with like getting somebody in. I remember in the IT world, you know, if somebody hacked your IT system, what did you do with them? You didn't send them to jail by the police. You hired them, right? So if you see somebody out there actually taking this impact activism role, freaking hire them. Because let them get in there and give them some insights if they're from outside. If they're like if you're doing it from inside, then I would really like invite them into the boardroom and say, look, Thomas, it's really nice to have you here, but you make a lot of noise. Let's talk about this noise and let's figure out how we actually get the company in one direction, if they dare to do that. And I don't think we are there yet to do that. But if we then have people on the other side, like they did with Greta, like invited, right, then we just still miss the actions, because, you know, of course, politicians can't change the world. It's everybody who has to make an impact, right? Actually changing their mindset. And one CEO can't handle it all. One CEO can't do it. It's back to the employees, and it's back to actually putting the impact activism, not compliance officer, but, you know, the officer actually making sure that taking that voice in and make sure that the company actually being there, because B Corp, science-based targets, UN Global Compact, all these organizational frameworks that there's tons of consultants that would really like to help getting companies on it. It's like McKinsey, right? You get in there, you get a nice report, and then like, okay, who have to execute this shit? And nobody does it, and then it's just lay there, right? I think it's using some of these things, saying if you have somebody which you know of is actually creating a lot of noise on the other side, then figuring out how you actually can invite them in actually and take that serious, and not just by having a nice dinner with the CEO and then, yeah, it's done. No. You have to be doing much more, or you need to actually set aside people who can work with this, also in terms of crisis management and all those things, but also in terms of like being business developers, because we need to learn from that, right? Why is Amazon's employees striking, and what can we do for that? And it will hurt economically. Of course it will. It's an investment, but this investment will definitely be some great long-term investments if you focus on this and actually take the signal up as saying, look, we need to go in that direction.
So what you say, Varan, is that communication involvement, actually listening to the little voices is what we should do to a larger extent than listening to, for example, stakeholder shareholders. Is that what you say?
I would definitely think, I remember I posted when this GameStop was running out, and then I posted a video stating that imagine if when the Greta generation gets to that they have a bank account, they have some funding, and then companies act not ethically correct and they start actually voting with their money. So imagine that this generation goes in with the stakeholder perspective and do it that way. I'm scared. I would be really scared if you did that way, because we have this proxy voting in the investment world that, you know, you get people up to sit at the board meetings and actually push the companies in one way. And here in Denmark, for instance, is all the pension companies trying to come out and saying, hey, we don't want to invest in this thing. Imagine if you can have the movement of people putting them together, like Thomas's Impactor app, that he has a lot of young people like grouping them and saying, great, let's go to this and go and get a shareholder, like be shareholders of this company, and then try to crowdfund the pool of amount of money we can save, and then go to the meeting. Then that will be another discussion if you go that way. That's what I like. I smile a little bit because like it could be a nice scenario. And I actually think that, in a couple of years, this will happen in some degree. It's just a matter of time because, pulling thousands of people, putting some money in, look, you can easily get a big percentage to get in there into the boardrooms and saying, look, you need to listen here. Otherwise we pull it up, or we get other people to get it out there. Right. So there's like different ways of looking at it, but I actually think you have to look at like consumers, employees, investors. The most easiest way, the low-hanging fruit, is from the employees, and then whether it's investors or it's from the consumer side. I don't know which comes first. But we see more and more young generations investing in companies that they actually believe in, and actually would like to be a part of all this new sharing economy. Like we have Donkey Republic going public soon. We have green mobility. We have all these sharing, companies going public, where people want to be a part of that. And if companies don't act ethically correct, the investors would definitely state something there, because there's a different way of looking at impact and profit of the new generation of investors.
To anybody else on the call, if and when you have questions, then just either raise your hand or type them in the chat, and then we will be happy to post them or hurl them towards Varan so he can help us. Varan, I remember one time, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, I was in a bank helping them with their transformation, and we were talking about. They were seeing the rise of social media. They were looking at Facebook at that time. It was going really big. All the freer ones like TikTok and Instagram and so on were not that present. Then we were talking about, so should we put the bank into social, or social into the bank? What kind of role should you play as a bank? Should you be moving into the social feed of people, or should you be inviting them into the bank? How should we go about that, Varan? How should we get in dialogue with those people?
With the digital generation, you're saying, how do we invite them into our space? It's actually a great question, and I remember that I was working in the bank at that time. And I remember I went to Danske and talked about that. How could we create an environment, a cafe, where our consumers could come around and actually talk about business development stuff. That's what, like, physically we did that, right? Like, had these talks. And of course, the prioritization at that point was like to take all this physical branches out, so it wasn't on the topic. But 3 years ago, Arbejdernes Landsbank created like this type of environment, right? A cafe, to do that, right? So I think still the physical touch is really, really important to get closer to the users or the consumers, of course. In terms of whether a bank should be on TikTok or not, for instance, I know Luna has done it, and that's on Snapchat, and that's on TikTok. Mostly on Snapchat, that's where they get their clients in, right? That's where they pick up the clients and the customers. So back to whether a company is digital, like if you are a Grundfos, right? You don't sell pumps online, right? You sell pumps in the field. So it's totally different way of selling it, right? But in terms of having a digital service related company, I think and believe that first of all, you need to make sure that you have the temperature of what is people talking about, and whether they're on Facebook, which is the older generation, or you are on Instagram, that the millennials are, and then there's like Twitch and you name all the social medias which is there, depending on of course where, like, and this is not about like a social media strategy of like where to be, but I think in terms of this impact activism, where the discussions appear, like occurs or starts, is sometimes in these Facebook groups. Reddit is not that big in Denmark, but it's somewhere, it's elsewhere. But these different communities, like we create one now in Make Impact where we are, and we are going to talk about a lot about like how and which companies should we invest in, and creating that thing. Like I hope and believe that our community will be there where, like, if you are listed a company and you want to hear like what's happening from the investor side on whether Tesla is is sustainable or not, or eToro or some of the other channels, we would like to create these communities, because we actually believe in that's where you can see these signals, you can feel the vibe. But the way you have to act as a company in this is actually to just either you create the platform and then just saying, we have the platform here, you do what you do, we don't interfere with it, or you act as a non-salesman, right? As a thought leader, or not trying to respond. I know that now we're talking about Danske Bank and I've been working there, so I remember the stories, but like trying to answer, like, and trying to come up with something like that creates a bigger shitstorm if you do that. So it's really, really important that having these impact activists on the corporate side to be the person actually facing these generations, different places. So hire an impact activist and get them to help growing your business, but also being able to take the talks, because then you have the tone of voice, which is a totally different thing. That if Thomas and I, we're going to talk about things about in the impact journey, whether a company is sustainable or not, like we can have a totally different discussion, because we actually have a respect for each other on we want to do this good. And look, I am hired by this and this and this. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing this, because actually I want to change this oil company to be much more sustainable, or whatsoever it could be, right? So if you go back to Dong 5 years ago, if we had a Greenpeace activist working for Dong and was leading the transition of selling the oil and gas, think about how much better, or it went good for us too, right? In terms of like the popularity and how they were like looked at as a sustainable company, but still think how that could change the way that it moved forward as well, having the activists on the same journey. We receive a lot of comments about having different type of companies in our app. We also have oil companies, and we also know what they are working on, but I'm not going to be an advocate of that company because I don't work there, and the CEO can have another direction tomorrow. So we are not going to state that we are experts on this, but it's really, really important that we see the whole picture of these things, and being the advocates of the companies, but also having people that have this, is it really correct? But we need to embrace these impact activists if we get them in. We shouldn't just hire them for saying it, hey, we have these people and this, like, and then shut them down. They have to get all the way to the top and be able to that. And we need, I think actually we are getting somewhere where people can speak up their mind and not getting judged by, or like putting down into like a corner saying, yeah, shut up. Because you can't do that anymore. Like if you do that,
we just saw that debate on Twitter regarding Basecamp a week ago, how that exploded when they tried to tone down that political discussions were not nice to have at the office. That kind of exploded on Twitter. Was it 2 weeks or 1 week ago? That was. Really
and people talk, and they're like, that's why like the greenwashing part. It's one of the things that companies have to get started doing, right? And not doing it and getting out there and actually state that nobody's perfect in this world, and we know that, right? So getting on that, right? That's some of the things that I hope to see, and I hope that companies dare to take that pledge, or like take that stick to actually move forward, to make sure that they they are on top of what's happening on this thing. And so it's not to be like scared about, okay, we can have a shitstorm coming tomorrow. No, it's actually to saying, look, we need to go in the direction that the employees, the consumers and investors actually want us to do. And having these quick surveys and all these things, yeah, they're nice. They give us some sort of a signal again. But I think if you're really bold, then you have to go and actually do being the first mover, actually to get some of the people in and actually get them to change the company inside. From inside than just from outside. I think that's,
yeah, super. We have 3 minutes left of our little blitz webinar thing here. If you have questions, please just shout out and we will make sure to make use of it. Varan, one last question for me at least. I work with currently some heavily regulated organizations, being in finance or pharmaceuticals or engineering, or for people who actually, if they were to go and take that advice that you're giving us here to embrace that kind of activism or impact thinking, people will say, yeah, but we might not have time to do that. It takes so much time to involve people. And the involvement part, literally, it slows us down, which I totally understand. It does. Talking to people, involving people, listen to the little voices, it does take time, and it slows us down from decision making. What would be your good advice, Varan, for people to actually embrace that and still keep their lights on their business?
First of all, you mentioned finance and you mentioned pharma, right? Like I quit 3 months after being in Novo Nordisk IT, because the pharma industry takes 30 years to get a product from idea stage to actually, on the shelf, right? So for me, I was like, okay, if it takes 30 years to do that, why not listen to people and actually move? Like, no, I'm just making fun. But I think I would say that if you really don't want to run out of business within the next 10, 20 years, you definitely need to embrace and use time on this. And this has to come all the way from the boards to the C-level executives. And I actually think that who has to take that agenda and actually moving, because we can state it and we can get it out there and try to, as a consultant or like some activist on this agenda, actually going out there and push it out there. But it will come automatically from the employees, I believe, because people don't want to work where there's no like impact or there's no purpose. And I know that we have talked to Simon Sinek and all those things, but people actually start, taking the chance and dare to take the chance to actually quit if they don't feel with the companies. And you can see that, right? The pandemic gave us hard times, but also some good times in order to actually reflect on our lives. And it's like a worldwide thing, right? So I actually believe and hope that this pandemic also pushed us to actually rethink what we want to do with our life, because time is running and we have heard about that all the time since we grew up. But I always talk about the legacy, right? What type of legacy do you actually want to have behind when you are sitting there next to dying, right? Like, so I hope that the employees will do that, but from the executive side, like I definitely think that they have to prioritize this. Time is the baddest excuses like ever, because if these companies don't do these things, they don't exist within the next 20, maybe less years, but I tend to say 20 years because actually it takes time. But I've just been so amazed about how the Greta generation and then to the Reddit, like this movement, like I won't say exponentially because we got this pandemic hitting us exponentially within that time period, but I actually think that it will actually rise really, really soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Varan, for that kick in the butt. That was, I think that was well put. So it is back to one of the slides that we had previously, and you ended that with that actually, Varan, to say if you as an organization, if you don't embrace this and start doing this, your employees, your customers, your investors will do that for you and solve that problem for you. So either you are with or you're against, to put it bluntly. So
yeah, I think also just to state that, like, I am working with companies right now that comes and say, look, man, we have heard our investors and our clients is actually asking about the bigger purpose of what we do and what are we doing to solve these ethical issues that we see in these areas. And that's cool that, you know, some companies are pushed, and that's scale-ups, right? Pushed by other around. It's like, hey, you need to look at this. And it's like, okay, great. And 2 years ago, I talked to the same CEO, and it was like, yeah, sustainability is nice. And so I can see that the change is happening, and I was just like smiling. It's like, yes, it's actually coming. So I think we don't have to be scared about it. Of course, we can always put all these, shitstorm here and there, but actually we have to embrace that this is coming. And for the people who have kids, which is like around these 15 to 25 years old, like, start listening to what they say also on this agenda, because this is going to hit your company really, really soon. So we can learn a lot from our kids. We can learn a lot from our employees. We can learn a lot from our consumers. Investors is also coming in, because the younger they are, the voice will come there. But the 60s mindset is coming. It's like fashion. If we have that in mind, we can start looking at, okay, when is it coming again? Like forecasting it, right? But anyway, we don't know who is existing or what exists in the next 20 years.
No, but then back to what Good Morning April is all about, to shape the futures that we want to be part of. So we can actually be part of shaping exactly the future that we will create with our kids also. So with that, thank you, Varan. That was really, really nice. To people listening, I can highly recommend following Varan on LinkedIn. I don't have a TikTok. If you're on TikTok, Varan, I have no.
No, I am not. I'm not. LinkedIn is my favorite.
So he keeps posting good stuff, thought-provoking stuff. So that is highly recommended. We will send you the slides when we're done, and thank you all for stopping by and listening in, and go change the world. That's all I'll say.
Impact the future.
Happening. See you.
See you.